All right, well, I'm going to talk about eBird tonight, and I'm going to do a lot of hands-on stuff, so we're going to show you actually sort of, I'm going to play around with it a little bit. How many people have heard of eBird? How many people use eBird? A fair number of you do. You see Denny's kind of wishy-washy on the use. I'm going to show you how you can use it to enter your own birding data, but also how you can use it to, let's say, research a place you're going to visit and see what kind of bird data there is for that spot. How you can use it to look at photos and videos and listen to audio birds, which is all the sort of input that Cornell is also used to put into their Merlin app. So I'm going to run through a little bit of what it is, when it came about, and I'll use some of my own examples as far as how I came into using it and how I use it, what we can learn from it, and then as I said, I'll actually open the app on my phone and show you how to enter data. And then I'll toss it out to people if you want to if you're interested in looking at a hotspot and looking what the data looks like, or you're curious about a bird and where it's occurred lately. Just as I talk about how it can be used, then I'll throw it out to the audience for some ideas on what you might want to look at. So eBird was created by Cornell, the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology, in 2002. And I was a little late to come into it. I was working for American Bird Conservancy at the time, and I was doing a lot of bird work around the country, working with Partners in Flight, which is all the various agencies and organizations working on bird conservation. A lot of really avid birders who had found a niche within their organizations and agencies to really put their sort of love of birds to use in their profession, and I was one of those people. But at the time, we were still trying to encourage people to use the Montana Natural Heritage Program Tracker Program, which is a really excellent program run out of Helena to put in biological data, and it has mapping mapping capabilities and whatnot. And so I was still urging people to use that rather than eBird for a while. And myself, I was a little intimidated by the thought that I now had to put all my sort of casual birding, make it into something that I had to put online. It seemed like another chore on top of what I was doing for work. But I rapidly came to the two realizations. One was that data entry is far more easy in eBird than it is on the tracker program. We did get them to start to talk to each other a little bit. And also, the thing about eBird is you can do as little or as much as you want. If you want to just enter an occasional checklist from your yard, a partial checklist, just occasional sightings, incidental sightings, you can do that. If you want to get obsessed with it, you can go very deep. It's a rabbit hole that's deep as could be. And I'll show you some of those depths maybe tonight. But the nice thing about it, it's open access. It's a way for citizen science to become really meaningful. It's a way to keep track of all your lists. I'll show you how it does some of that. It's very user-friendly once you start to use it. The data that goes into it is vetted by experts, so it does have a quality control function, and I'll talk about that. In fact, I'll show you a little bit under the hood on that tonight. And what it is geo-referenced bird sightings all over the world, and there's now more than 1 billion records in the eBird database. And so as you can imagine, that's a very powerful database. Now, the fact that it's vetted does mean that the quality is controlled somewhat, but again, citizen science, so the quality can vary a lot. You can get past some of that when you have billions of records, and really the power in the number of records is really phenomenal. So, it's a tool that allows you to record the birds you see. It does a great job of keeping track of your bird lists. In fact, I keep all kinds of lists now that I never would have thought about keeping in a million years in the past because it does it automatically. Anytime you enter a bird into eBird, it updates your month list, your year list, your yard list if it's in your yard, your county list, your state list, your USA list, your world list. So it just keeps all these lists for you. And some people actually only use it as a listing tool. That's the main attraction to them. And in fact, Cornell is kind of genius about that, and I'll show you some of the ways that they have hooked into birders to get them to use it more and supply more data. There's so much data that they're really developing some wonderful tools, some maps and graphs, and I'll show you some of those. Some very powerful visual tools about bird distribution and bird declines and bird movement over time. And it's really a fun way to share your sightings. It's a really good way once you're used to using eBird a lot. I'm sure many of the people that use it here will look and see what other people are reporting, and you can go sort of chase things that other people have seen. it's sort of an expanded eBird community that you become a member of. But it really does also help them take your daily birding wherever you do it and help and really make some contributions to science and conservation. So as far as your own data, you can do it real time with a mobile app, and I'll show you how to do that, or you can do it sitting at your desktop at the end of the day if you've done a list somewhere. It automatically, as I said, updates all your lists. Then you can upload photos to it, and I'll show you how to do some of that. So I'm going to just start off showing you some examples of how it's my own data show up in eBird and the ways that you can look at it. Anybody can go to the main eBird page, but I'm automatically logged in because I went to it on my own computer. And it keeps stats, and so you see here on the left, it has my world list and my life list for the ABA of North America, how many checklists I've submitted, things like that. A streak of one day in a row putting in the checklist. I'm not very good about putting in the checklist every single day. And so then you can click on My eBird, and it shows you sort of, just gives you an instantaneous sort of, here's a list of the checklists that I've done recently, how many species were on each. You can click on any of those, and it shows you what species they were and where you were at the time when you recorded them. It's given you, it gives me, it defaults to my home state, so it shows me how many species I've seen in the state, how many checklists I've submitted, how many species I've got photos of with the eBird checklist, where I am for the year, so it's 51 species so far, and on and on. There's rabbit holes, as I mentioned. So last year at this point I was at 60 species, so I'm kind of a laggard so far this year apparently. What I ended up with at the end of the year, your species for January, and then it's got for each county in the state. And so, for example, I never kept county lists. This is not something that I was interested in doing. I do keep a lot of lists, as many obsessed birders do, generally as an incentive to stop and smell the roses, if you will. It's like you're going someplace where you have not seen many species. Suddenly, a common species is important because it's a new bird for that area for you. And so I've been really bitten by the county listing bug since I've been using eBird, especially since I moved to Billings for 6 years and was birding and traveling a lot to the Dakotas and started going through all the eastern Montana counties. And so one of the uses I've been doing of eBird is trying to see 100 species in every county in Montana. And I've got 6 left. So I have some travels to do to get out to Roosevelt and Richland counties and Mineral County, which is a tough one down here at CB's. But that's one of the things that I've done with it. But on any one of these, you can just click on the county, and then it shows you sort of how many checklists you've put in, how many species you've seen, what the most recent checklist you did there were, et cetera. So it's really amazing how many of the things it just keeps track of for you automatically. And you can change the region. Let's see if I can do that, I guess. So same thing for the world, how many species, how many checklists, etc. And then the other thing that it will do, so I go down here to profile, it shows a map, and again, the map is based on Montana counties. So it shows you, you can just scroll around and it'll show each county how many species I've recorded, et cetera. And then you can zoom in or zoom out. So you zoom out and it shows you the US and what you've got for each state. And again, you can click on those and delve into those and see what your checklists were, et cetera. So one of the things that I've done, and people that really start getting into this a little bit, is go back and take old records, old travels, old bird checklists from places like, I grew up in New Jersey, so I have quite a New Jersey list. I haven't been in New Jersey in a while, but I have gone back and entered some historic data things. So that's kind of what it'll end up doing for you as far as once your data is in there, to keep track of all these things. And it's a way of hooking people. As I said, the county listing thing, Cornell got me. It worked for me really well. Now I'm going out and I'm contributing data from all the counties in the state because I just provided that incentive to myself. And so that in itself is turning that data back to Cornell. So Just to show you, just for an example, how you would submit a checklist online from your desktop. So let's say that, today I went birding somewhere here locally. I want to look up where that was, Flathead. It's pretty smart. It'll default to things that you use pretty often. It'll bring up a map. You can zoom into that map then. And on here, the red little icons are hotspots, birding hotspots. So those are available to anybody. The blue are personal spots. So that's all the blue ones are places that I've put in a checklist at some point or another. So let's say that today I went and I hiked the Sunny Boom Trail in Summers, which is one of my local hotspots that I visit pretty often. I would go down here and click on it, and so then it automatically loads up Sunny Boom Trail as the location. I would go in here and pick the date, and then I would say, let's say I just I traveled, I hiked, and I started at 10 a.m. and I birded for 50 minutes and hiked one way. They want one-way distances. Let's say I hiked at 1 mile and just myself, and you can put any kind of checklist comments you want. And then when you hit continue, it will bring up a list of birds that's based on the point that you selected on the map. So it's basically, here's the universe of birds you would expect to be choosing from this time of year in that particular place. And so then you just go through here and you say, well, I saw one cooper, saw, etc. And when you're done, is it all the birds you saw, yes or no? They do encourage people to do a checklist of all the birds that you saw. They can build better models. So some of the models I'll show you in a bit are based on places where people did a complete checklist. So in other words, if they didn't see a particular bird there, it's because the assumption was it wasn't there. Because if you just put in 2 species of birds, you can't say very much more about what else was or wasn't there. So they do encourage people to do complete checklists. In this case, let's say I didn't keep a complete checklist. I said no, I just had a cooper saw. And so that's it. And then it would just be in there. And I'll go back and take this out later. But that's how easy it is to enter data. So what you can do is you can zoom in on the map. When you do that, I selected a hotspot. You can also just zoom in on the map and just click. Put a point, and then you can name it. So you can say, my yard, whatever the name, a name that's logical for the point that you did. And I'll show you, so that's how you can enter data using this interface. And I'm going to go and spend a lot of time on that. I'd be more than happy if someone is going to be doing this for the first time to give me a call and I'll talk you through the details. I can get hung up on any elements. It's pretty straightforward. I still think that the mobile data entry is a little bit easier. So in addition to managing your own data, there's all kinds of ways that you can explore the data that's within eBird. And so, show you this full screen. So you can explore species, so you can just type in a species name, and I'll show you how this all works. You can explore regions. So you can use this for research if you're going somewhere, or if you just want to learn about an area. You'll see down here there's an explore hotspots. So what you can do there is you enter the name of the hotspot, and you just bring up the total list for that hotspot, what recent checklists have been put in there. You can generate an illustrated checklist for it. Species maps, you can search photos, and then there's these bar charts, which are sort of seasonal distribution. So that one is particularly useful if you're going to travel somewhere and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be in Spokane next week. What can I expect maybe I would see if I was going to go birding at some place around Spokane? In fact, where might I want to go? You can figure out a hotspot and it'll give you a list of the birds. And then you can click on the bar chart and see actually which ones are going to be most likely. So it's a really good learning tool, especially if you're traveling to places that you don't know yet. So you go up here and you hit the explore button. And let's say you want to explore species. And so let's say we want to know where snowy owls are being seen so far this week. Well, first off, when you go here, it'll show you, there's an opening page that's like just informational about the species. So a series of pictures, identification, and then statistics for recent observations, weekly bar chart, and then a range map. And then when you zoom into the map, it'll show you where the birds have been reported recently. It'll show you that using a different tool. But, so that's the explore species. Exploring regions, again, if you just go to Flathead, for example, it'll show you the most recent sighting of every species that's been seen in the county. It'll show you the top recent photos that have been uploaded by eBirders. It'll show you recent visits. If you click on recent visits, it'll show you all the recent checklists that have been submitted and where they were, and on any of those you can just click on them. So here's one from the West Valley, the real area of the West Valley, Andrew Kimmel, list of the species you saw and the numbers and a photo of the maximum. Top hotspots, so this is a list of those hotspots. So if you look at, say, Wayfarer State Park, just as an example, 166 species have been reported at Wayfarer State Park, 539 checklists. Let's bring this up a little bit so it's easy to see. If you hit the illustrated checklist, it'll build this is a combination of the bar chart, so it shows you when in the year you would expect to see any particular species. So Canada geese are reported basically year-round, a little less in the summer. And then it'll upload sort of one of the best photos that's been submitted from that site of the species. And so not a lot of photos have been submitted at Wayfarers, a lot of them are waterfowl, not surprising. Not surprisingly, you can click on those and check those out. So a lot of real information that's embedded there, and it's all tiered. And again, a lot of this, if you're going to go out birding for the day, I check the Flathead County thing pretty often, see what are people seeing and where. Certainly before that field trip on the 15th, I'll do that just to see sort of what the local hawks are looking at. So that's a pretty powerful tool. The species maps, as I mentioned, that's kind of, we saw that within the snowy owl one, but let's just do another one. Let's do pine grosbeak. And you can then zero in on an area, so you can say Montana. There's a Montana in Bulgaria that I occasionally mistakenly click on, and that's always entertaining. It's like, what? So what? And then again, this is zoomable, and so you can zoom in or out, and it'll have these little purple polygons where the species has been reported, and then if you hit show points sooner, as you zoom in, it'll show you all of the places where it's been reported. Now this is all year-round, all years. But you can go up there and say, well, I'm just curious so far this year, where we've been seen. And the red ones are places where it's been seen in, I think, in the last 2 weeks. So recent locations are red and less recent. So obviously, when they do this year, it's just the last 9 days. And when you click on these, then it'll show you, where it was, who the observer was, and you click on the whole checklist, and you can see the whole checklist. So there, and then Essex drinking basin. So not that many reports this winter so far of pine grosbeaks, and it doesn't surprise me. In fact, winter finches in general this winter, there haven't been many siskins, there haven't been many red poles. I don't know if anybody's seen any red poles. Evening grosbeaks, and there's a lot of things that just haven't seen much. So again, all kinds of stuff you can explore within the eBird database. That's the species map, and you can do that again. It's fun to do if you're going to travel someplace exotic, especially. Told you about the bar charts, and you saw some of those come up. Within the main page, there are links to things like eBird Essentials that sort of talk about all the kinds of things I'm talking about. There are some eBird courses you can take to learn about it. There are some variety of tips and tricks for using eBird. So they really are trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. They've got a submission map that you can look in real time around the world. I do not think that there's a lot of checklists going in at the moment from North America, since it's dark. There should be a little yellow light that pings up anytime someone submits a checklist. If you look at it in the middle of the day, it's just popping all over the place. But you can see that while it's a worldwide database, there's one down there in the
It's daytime.
so a few people are looking at owls, apparently. You can see that while it's a worldwide database, I mean, it's heavily, the bias is heavily in Europe and North America. That's cool.
And Dan also note that the eBird Essentials courses are free. So it takes you to their courses, which they have some paid courses, which are very good as well.
And they have a number of things here. They have news. Luckily, the server's not down tonight. It's going to be down in 2 days for a while. Year in review. We have these eBird of the Month challenges, like everyone that submits at least one checklist a day will be eligible for drawing to get a pair of Zeiss binoculars, or everyone who submits at least 20 checklists with photos attached will be, the draw names and their monthly birders in that category.
Dan,
Yes.
can you go in and show how you would print a checklist? Like, let's say you were gonna go, I don't know, somewhere in maybe Bos del Pache, National Wildlife Refuge, and you wanna have a checklist that's printed so you can mark off all the birds that you've seen.
It's not something I do, so I don't.
Well, that isn't something you do?
No, I think it does allow you to do that.
It does, when you go into, like, he's doing it right. So view details. And then on the left-hand side,
Printable checklist.
yeah, there you go. Those are really awesome. Right ahead of time.
And if you do that, then you can take it and enter your data later.
Yeah, because if you're in a place where you're not in cell service, you can make eBird work when it's offline, but this is a little bit easier than when you go back to your Airbnb or whatever. If you're on Wi-Fi, then you can just submit your checklist over the internet.
Yeah, I will say that eBird encourages people to enter numbers, not just check marks. When I went back to do a lot of my historic birding, I have a lot of checklists, like an embarrassing number of checklists in boxes from all my travels over the years, and most of them just have check marks. So you can still enter those data, because it shows which birds you saw on which day. I was lucky enough to at least put the day on a few of them. Some of them I don't even have that. But it is best to put numbers, and they do encourage people to put your best estimate of numbers. And if it's an unusual number, to say how you arrived at that estimate. So I'll talk about the filters in a little bit, and how you'll get prompted to provide details sometimes when you enter data. And that's because if you enter more than is typically expected at that time of year, especially if it's an order of magnitude more, they want you to say how you arrived at that number. So I'll often, even locally, if I had, like the other day at Dayton, I had 1,500 redheads, and it popped the filter. It was higher than the filter says should be there. But I had counted them by 50s, 1,500, 150, 200, etc. So what you want to do when you can is put numbers down, not just X marks. But you can do a combination, or you can do just X's as well. So I showed you all these various things, and so this is something you can just go into explore or it's something you can actually use to plan for travels. And so one of the things that I do, two things that I do as far as enhancing my own birding experience. One is this target species function, which you can go in and say, okay, I'm going to go to Washington State. I am going to go to Washington State in just over a week. And I can say, what species have been seen in Washington in January that I haven't seen in Washington? So it'll tell you, here's the species you need for Washington. So then if I'm going to get out to bird, I could say, well, I need 5 waterfowl species. If I'm going to go out birding, I should go to the lake and see if I can find those species. The other is alerts. So you can set alerts within eBird that anytime someone reports a bird that you want to see in a particular place, it'll pop up and you can see it. So I, for example, get Flathead bird alerts. So anything that comes in as rare, pops a filter in Flathead I get. And then statewide as well. And so that's, you don't get too many of those if you don't have a lot of them set. It just gives you sort of a heads up, hey, they're seeing a northern hawk owl in Wise River, in the vehicle. Those kinds of things. So decide you want to go chasing a bird. And then it keeps track, it has this top 100, which again, this is Cornell's genius. They know that a lot of birders are competitive. In fact, some birders, all they care about in eBird is this top 100. It's like, am I in the top 100? Am I in the top 100? Yard totals, you keep track of your yard list, patch totals, etc. So I'll show you what those look like. So let's look at that top 100, just show you what each of those things is. Go back to explore. So the top 100. Again, this is a curiosity for many, and it's all that drives certain birds. But, so let's see Montana. For this year, Montana, Bulgaria, we don't want that. So right now, Victor Fasalowitz from Bozeman is leading the pack for January of 2023 with 75 species seen. So just list everybody. You can do that for all time. You can do that for other places, different areas. So that's the top 100. Kind of silly, but it does incentivize people to do a lot of birding, and that's why Cornell included it, because they know people like that kind of fun stuff, and there's a competitive nature thing. The alerts, I mentioned what those are. Yard totals. So you just have to set this up, define what they are, add a yard. I have my yard in Summers and then the yard in Billings, 2 places I've lived since I've been doing here. And it just tracks. So every time you do a yard list, if there's something new, it adds it to that list. Patch lists, I'll show you what I have. And I don't remember, honestly, I didn't do a little bit more research on setting these up, adding a patch, but I have a Summers area. So I define that by a certain number of places that I typically bird in Summers. The North Shore IBA, which is sort of the whole North Shore, which has several different hotspots in it, so we can pull those all in one. But eventually they're going to have a polygon tool where you just draw on it. You literally go on a map and just draw a polygon, and every checklist that you put inside that polygon, and I'll do that. You can do a photo and sound quiz. So just kind of training yourself, and so so this would be for where we are in Montana, in Northwest Montana in January. And so just pick from the likely birds within the eBird database to quiz you.
It's trying to use your location. You might have to just put in a place.
I think that would be better. I don't want to have to keep too much track of them. Bulgaria. So then it'll just pop stuff up, and then it gives you multiple choice. Oh, and right away they give us a one of the there's a Harris's. So fun little thing, just a tool like that. You don't have to actually be contributing to eBird, putting records in order to do any of this, and all of this is free.
Well, and they do that so that you can review the photos. That's the trade-off.
Oh, yeah, so the other thing that you can do in Explore, I'll show that, is you can search photos and sounds. And so, and again, this is, you can do this by species, you can set filters based on location, on behaviors, and any number of things. Like location, again, if we want to just do Flathead, county, maybe you can do it by date, just say, this would be year-round, all years. It's going to show you all the photos that have ever been contributed from Flathead County. So there's the purple finch that Lee mentioned that they had at their feeder at Tito's in Bigfoot just yesterday. And so, yeah, you just go in there, and then you can also set it for your own media. It has a button right there for My Media, so it'll just show you all of your own photos that you've submitted with checklists. And again, it's all sortable. This is not a bad identification tool. It's kind of like you photograph a bird and you're not sure, is that a male or a female, or even what species it is. You can just plug that into this filter and it'll give you all the photos in the Macaulay library of that, of a female, whatever. So it's a nice, powerful tool for just searching through the extensive library in the Cornell lab. As I said, for the target species, so who's going somewhere soon? Nobody's going. What a boring group. Going to Virginia. Where in Virginia? You know what county it's in?
Audubon. I think it's
I was born there. All right, so you're going this month? Okay, so have you ever seen any birds in Virginia?
Yeah.
All right, well this is going to do it for me. It's going to be based on my Virginia. Yes, good. So 134 species that have been seen in Albemarle County. Oh, this is for the county list, so I don't know if I can have an album now. Anyway, they're in reverse, they're in, most frequently reported, but least frequently reported. So it gives you an idea. Most commonly reported birds, cardinal, white-throated sparrow, Carolina wren, Carolina chickadee, American crow, etc., all the way down the list to birds that are hardly ever seen. Common redpoll, rufous hummingbird, big sisal, pretty rare birds in January anywhere, but so so you can do that wherever you're traveling. You can be specific. It's mostly at the county level or country level or major region level. But it's a way to think ahead. There's some things I should be looking for.
Click on that northern cardinal, does it tell you where the family disease is?
Yep. So it gives you the basic information at the top, and and then it gives you statistics for the county. So whatever level you typed in, it gives you the statistics for that. Yeah, so then you can look at that and go, I want to see a cardinal. Of course, you shouldn't have to work too hard to see a cardinal. But again, you can then zoom in and you can get the actual places that people have reported. So.
Question.
Yeah.
What are the major differences between the mobile app and what you're using?
Yeah, I'll show you in a minute. So all these data are available through the mobile app. It's just that it's all crammed onto this little screen.
That's what I thought. Well, it didn't seem to have all the functionality.
Yeah, it does. You can get there. There's a sort of a hack. I can show you how to do that. Right. In fact, I'll go to the mobile app pretty soon, so I'll show you that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's under the hood before I go sort of onto the app and show you how to use the app. So as I mentioned, when you see a bird that's out of season or out of place or in numbers above and beyond what you expect, it'll trip a filter. And so you get a little thing, ding, rare, or unusual number, and it asks you for details. And the way that that's set up under the hood, behind the scenes, is that for every county, in some cases multiple counties are on individual filters, and this is the Montana map, there's a designated reviewer who will see everything that gets reported that's rare or an unusual number. And this just shows you sort of, these are all first names, but because I lived in Billings as long as I did, see, I'm the reviewer for a number of southeastern Montana counties. Josh is, Koval is the reviewer for Sanders and Lake counties, Craig does Flathead and Lincoln counties, Josh does Glacier County, etc. So these are all people that are on the Montana Bird Records Committee, or longtime birders, some level of expertise. And so what these people do is they review these records and they set the filters within each of these areas, and then modify the filters as we go. So we're always modifying the filters. We're supposed to be checking these regularly and modifying the filters regularly. And I'll show you what those look like here. And the reason that all happens is to take this huge amount of citizen data and make it, reliable enough to start putting together these models that can really, inform science. So let's go under the hood. So right now there are 378 records in the review queue for Montana of birds that tripped a filter one way or another. And so not all of these are particularly rare. Some of them are just because it was slightly more than was expected at this time of the season. But at any point in time, there might be a few hundred records in here. And those of us that are reviewers, we've done a quick review. I have responsibility for a couple of different, we can all see all of the statewide, but I'm responsible for 3 of these filter areas in southeast Montana. So here, for example, is a record of 2 McGillivray's warblers in Dawson County in July, just recently got entered apparently. The filter limit is 1. So here's the filter for McGillivray's warbler for Dawson area counties. And it says they don't occur there in that far eastern Montana all that often, and they're only expected to occur between May 15th and September 17th. Maybe this is a little small for people to see. People see what I'm talking about. So if I click on this, it'll show me the filters for that species on all the counties in the state. And so obviously in some of the western counties, like the Bitterroot, the numbers are higher. It goes from May 6th to October 6th, and 5, and then 9, and then 7. So a lot of the best filters kind of ramp up as the birds arrive in the spring. The numbers that you expect to be higher, and then they're lower and taper off in the fall. And they'll vary a lot from filter area to filter area, depending on how much effort the reviewer is putting into that. But so, for example, in the Bitterroot, if you reported any McGillivray's before May 6th, it would trip the filter. If you reported 6 on May 7th, it would trip a filter. If you reported 10 on May 30th, it would trip the filter. And usually, if it's just a slight difference in number, the reviewer will just accept it. But on each of these, actually, the reviewer has to make a determination. So, like in Dawson County, let's move it back to 19. So on this one, on this McGillivray's warbler, I could skip it, or I could review it. Buttons are coming up. So, it's 2 instead of 1. I'm just going to accept it and say it's not exceptional. And et cetera. So each of these things, I would make a decision. So varied thrush in Dawson in July, that's pretty odd. That's a strange one. So, we don't ever really expect varied thrushes in that county. So that's one I would probably contact Amy and say, do you have a little bit more details? Sounds like she described it reasonably well. I have another reviewer that started to take over on Boston Prairie, so I'll probably take care of that one. So that kind of gives you an idea what's going on. So any record that trips a filter, the person's asked for details. The key there is to put some details like how you identified it, how you estimated the number, not details like you're sitting on a branch or in the pond, which a surprising number of details that get put on eBird records are those kinds of details. It's just a matter of just, how did so if we're going to adjust the filters and accept the record, how did you arrive at that? So it's not really that intimidating. The rarest birds of the Montana Bird Records community would ask for much more detail, a photo. It's just a way that we consistently improve the filters and learn more about what birds are recorded there. Does it make sense how the filters work?
So doing this thing generates the real word that's good?
Yeah, depending, like an alert. If you had an alert set for a particular place, you would get an alert that said such and such.
And that's why sellers or marks confirm or something.
Yeah, that's whether someone has reviewed it already. Right.
Hey Dan, we got a question online that said, why are some species like calliope hummingbird, mountain chickadee, great gray owl, and Lewis's woodpecker not listed? I think some of those are, but some of those are not.
Not listed where?
That's a good question. I specifically, if you look if you look inside of eBird and you say like, oh, hey, great gray owls, where can I find those? And you can't find them.
Oh, okay. Well, there's only a few
that.
Species that they view as sensitive, and great gray owl is one, hawk owl is one. But people are aware where this hawk owl is, and so they're going there anyway. But they mask the locations of some birds. Gyrfalcon is one. The few of the falconers or overzealous photographers are going to sort of stress the birds. There's not that many birds that are masked, if that's the question.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So I get it with something like the northern hawk owl or a snowy owl that's really outside its norm. But even with a black-capped chickadee, I don't see it on the eBird list. With the other chickadees at least, and when I search for it, I don't get it. And so I go back and add it, but it seems like something like that, or an eastern kingbird I didn't see.
I'm not sure which list it is you're talking about, though.
So when I create a new checklist, there's a long list of birds that populates automatically that I can check, right?
Yep.
And so a black-capped chickadee isn't on that list for me. I'm down in the Bitterroot. An eastern kingbird isn't, and yet eastern kingbirds are pretty common, especially at Lee Metcalf.
You have your location turned on? If it's not showing common birds, it just means it doesn't know where you are, or you don't have the right bird pack loaded in eBird, because there are packs, like a Montana pack, that will have all the Montana birds.
Okay, I'll check locations. Thank you.
Yeah, look into that. I'm sure that's all it is, because it'll show you all the common things.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. So I'm just going to show you some of the science products, and then I'll open up my laptop, my mobile device, and you can look at that. So I mentioned that, with billions of records, with over 1 billion records, they've got some powerful tools that they've developed that show distribution based on eBird data, that show trend based on eBird data, how the birds are changing through time, and then actually movements over the season, some animations of where birds are over time. And these data can be used for a lot of things. As we look at the effects of climate change, a powerful data set that's decades, people are entering eBird data many decades in the past. They're going back and entering older data, so there actually is time series data in there. It can be a really powerful tool for looking at a lot of things. And I'll look at a couple of individual species to give you an idea of that. So some common species, and unfortunately some of that can be a little depressing looking at common species and what trends are showing and whatnot, but I just picked a few that I thought might be interesting to do. So if you go to the science link on the front page of eBird, it's got this eBird status and trends, and you can set a filter. So I'm just going to set this so I don't have to scroll through tinamous to find Montana birds. So I'm going to go ahead and actually put Flathead County so that we're dealing with more local birds. And so then it just builds this this link for each of the species that occur in Flathead County. And so let's look at killdeer, for example. So killdeer have a pretty wide range. So it shows you this is their year-round range. Again, based strictly on eBird data. Oh, that's abundance. So it shows relative abundance. So during various seasons. So the deepest red is where they're most abundant in the breeding season. That translates into a range map. So that's basically breeding season and year-round. And you can see that there's little pockets of year-round. We have an occasional killdeer here this time of year. Now let's look at weekly. So what they do for these years is they have an animation here that shows you this is January. This is where there's sort of a heat map or a density map of where killdeer are in January. And then I hit this and it's going to show how that changes as the year progresses. So February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, back to January. So they've got this for a wide variety of birds, and it's pretty fascinating. If you really, again, rabbit hole, right? If you really want to get into this, I did this with, I think, Lazuli buntings years ago, and it looked like there was a spot where they gathered in the monsoon season before they kept going south. So they all moved out of the west and paused in Arizona for a little while, and then went down in Mexico. So it's just kind of a really interesting tool. The trends is the sad part. So killdeer is really a common bird. We all know killdeer. There's no blue circles on this map. It's declining everywhere it occurs. And if you think about it, there are other species in this group. Piping plover doing poorly. Killdeer, they do well around humans, but that means they're around cats and cars and trucks and pesticides and any number of things. So it's not particularly uplifting to look at trends of common birds, but that's what eBird has shown us for killdeer. They're declining everywhere they occur. So let's go back to species. We've got tinamous again. That's no good. I'm going to have to spell it right. Evening grosbeak I thought I'd look at because that was a cover bird for the State of the Birds report that they were doing really poorly range-wide. So I thought it'd be interesting to see what it showed us now. And so here again is, this is abundance. Range map. Pretty much, Canadian and then down the spines of the Appalachians and the Rockies. And trends, interestingly, declining pretty much throughout Canada except the Maritimes. But actually this says that they're doing fairly well in the mid-Rockies, not so much up where we are. It seems like they've declined dramatically here. Those of us that have been around for decades in the valley. But again, just an idea of how this billion record data set from all of us can be used to look at some large scale issues.
They wander so much and wondering about the latitude. That one's sort of a lot of latitude.
Yeah, they do that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And you can do that with any species, right? So you can just, get in there and explore and see, you know, if that really would be good to do. Woodpecker. Species. I don't know why it's not going back to the previous filter. And of course, you know, there's all kinds of ways and sources of looking for range maps and things. It's just kind of interesting that they are taking these data and really taking them in this direction, which is interesting. So some people are surprised when they see pileated, if you say it that way. Either way is okay. I say pileated, that's my New Jersey roots. You know, some people are surprised when they see them out here in the West because they think of them as an eastern deciduous forest. There's abundance now. Range happens is the same, basically. Trends. They seem to be doing well almost everywhere other than the southern Appalachians, so that's encouraging. And weekly is not going to be, for resident type birds, for non-migratory birds, they don't have a trend map because it wouldn't change significantly. So again, just some examples. I guess I don't need to run through too many of those. Is there any one that someone would like to see?
Okay, this one here.
I don't think the trend map is going to look very pretty in the map of it. There's a trend map that's almost all negative. So this is percent change since 2007. So it's 14 years of change. The dark red is down 30% over those 14 years. So that's not very encouraging. Orange is 10% or so. Little couple spots. The Thunder Basin in Wyoming is doing okay, it looks like. Pretty localized. And so then the weekly, you know, obviously meadowlarks are migratory. So there's January. There's May, August, October, December, and June. So a lot of fun, really good way to learn about distribution of birds and really some interesting tools. One of the things that made me sort of an epiphany for me to get into using eBird was black swifts. There was a proposal for the North Shore of Flathead Lake to put in a rather large development a few years back. I know a few people will remember that. And I put a bunch of comments in. You know, I've lived in Summers right adjacent to where this was proposed. I've lived there for now 38 years, and I've been a birder for that entire time. And I wrote a fairly long set of comments about the birds that occurred in that area. And the consultant that was hired by the developer came back and said, "Well, how do I know you're just not making that up?" He basically, you know, called me out on these, you know, where's the data? How can you say that black swifts occur on the north shore of the lake regularly in the spring? Where's those data? Those don't exist anywhere. The same thing happened with like Church Slough and talking about, you know, wetland easements and looking for NAWCA grants, these North American Wetland Conservation Act grants. They require having some data, and there's places where we've been birding, those of us that have been doing it for decades, but no real record of that. Right? You know, go out and look at birds, but no place you could go and look at the data. And so I realized, well, heck, if I'd have been eBirding this whole time, I would have a bunch of data that you could click on. Here's what you saw. Here's a bar chart of the birds that occur at Church Slough. Here's the bar chart of the birds that occur on the North Shore of Flathead Lake. And so where we live in Summers, we've had black swifts About once or twice a year in June, we get a stormy weather and the wind coming off the north shore of the lake. And I think what it does is it gathers up clouds of insects. And we get these swarms of swallows and black swifts. And we've had as many as 100 black swifts over our house. Now, black swift is a bird of concern. It breeds behind waterfalls. You know, there's a number of spots they nest in glacier. One of the most highly vulnerable birds to climate change based on where they nest and whatnot. So I went back in and I entered a bunch of my data for black swift. So another thing that you can do when you look at your own data in eBird is it will show you. It's funny because I use it in a variety of ways, but it'll show you basically all the times that you've entered a particular bird. So if we go back and I go to explore again, my eBird, and I look at my Flathead County list, for example, it'll show me all the birds that I've reported in Flathead County, and you can sort that by first time they were seen or the last time they were seen or taxonomic. I'm going to do this taxonomic. And scroll down here to black swift, and it'll show me the last time I reported them, which was the time that I took those photos there. And then I can here go and view all. And what I've done is I've entered all of those times that I had seen them over our yard in summers over the year. So there's the time I'd seen 100 and 80. And so now here's a record that shows you, sort of how often that has happened. So it's a place where it's been vetted. And it's, it's mapped, it's geo-referenced, and so I started to realize there is a real power to that. The birding we do and just our casual going around the valley and looking at birds, whether it's from your yard or elsewhere, that there can really be some value to that. So I just wanted to include that as an example. So let's see if my phone is still showing up here. So let's say that I went to Owen Sour Wine today, or let's pretend I'm there right now, but it's the time of day when you can actually see birds. And I'll do a dummy checklist and show you how to do it with the mobile. So I'm going to change the time so here it is. This is showing what? Yeah, it's showing well enough. Maybe I should minimize other things on the screen. Is it too distracting?
I think you're good.
Right, okay. So this is what the mobile looks like when you open it and you hit enter a checklist. And so you can change the time. Okay, start checklist. So if you do it where you just hit start checklist, it's going to put a point, it's got a GPS in it, in the software. So it's determining my position right now. So it's going to put it here. It's having a hard time with that, so that's fine. We'll get back to that. So it's auto-selected a point now. So let's say I just go in there and I see it's got a list of expected birds. So I see a couple of wood ducks. I just click that. Every time you click it, you can add another one. So once you have the app open, you just have to touch the number and you can add birds like that. Or you can type up here a 4-letter code or just the first few letters of the name of the bird. So let's say you're a pileated woodpecker. Just look on there. So there it is. Just hit on cancel. So you just add birds like that. So you scroll down. So let's say I have a white-breasted nuthatch. So let's just say, let's keep it short so I don't have to spend too much time with this. So let's say that's all I saw. Then you review. And you're asked if it was a traveling checklist, and if you actually have got location services, if you've walked Owen Sour Wine, it'll actually track how far you walked. It's, keeps track of that. Or if you just stationary within a 30-meter circle, then pick stationary. And if you don't do all the birds, or you're just walking along, you're not really birding, but you're paying attention to the birds, you're entering the few, that's incidental. And the incidental you can use if you're just driving down the road and you see a golden eagle and you say, well, I'd like to get that any bird, just that one bird, and call it an incidental. Hit continue. No, there it is. It's putting us in the middle of the Gateway West Mall. But if I want to put it in Owen Sour Wine, then I just scroll across the map.
Is it the-
So Old Sour Line is called natural area in this case, but so use that location. Downloading, traveling. Let's say I did travel. That'll ask me how far it would have tracked me if I was had that on. But let's say I hiked, half a mile. So I'm gonna do it this way. Yeah, and let's say I just did 8 minutes, 10 minutes. And it was all the birds I saw, yes or no. So that wants you to say, is it a complete checklist or is it just a partial checklist? So done, submit, and then it goes. That's all there is to it. So the other thing that you can do, now it harvested my point, and then I went and changed it to Old Sour One. But if you want to do one where you pick ahead of time, you just hit explore, and it'll bring up the map. It's having trouble with the GPS. But trust me, if you have a good signal, it'll bring up the map, and then you can just hit Old Sour Line. One thing that people do, and I'll reiterate this again, is a lot of times people just pick the nearest hotspot when they go to enter a checklist. They go online and they're not sure exactly where they were, so they just pick something nearby where they were. I urge people to try to be accurate in where the point is when you do the eBird checklist. So make sure if you're doing it at a hotspot that you're actually at the hotspot, or if it puts a point on the map, just double check to see if the point on the map represents where you were. If you do a traveling checklist, you should put the point in the middle of, if you go 4 miles, you should put the point in the middle. It'll put it where you started. You should move it to the middle. There's some things like that you get used to as you go. But one of the things you can do, if you want to see the full functionality on the handheld app, is you go to checklists. This is a hack that I learned. I don't know if they describe it in eBird. You just click on any checklist that you've entered using the app. And once you're there, there's an eBird.org button on the bottom. And this takes you to, it looks like just to your checklist, but if you hit menu, it's the full eBird website. So then you can explore. It says all the functionality. This is what you were asking about, Gail.
Yeah.
This is the hack to get to that. Just click on a checklist and then hit that eBird checklist. eBird. So one other thing about adding photos, I don't ever add photos directly on my phone while I'm walking around. I often take photos with a point and shoot and then go add them later. And so I'm just going to show you how you do that. So now it should show that I did an Old Sour Wine checklist. There it is. So let's say that I took a picture of a white-breasted nuthatch when I was on that walk. So hit Add Media. And then minimize this. And then go to wherever you have your pictures stored. So let's just take all of these. We'll do this 2 different ways. And drag one over here. And blow it up to over here. So if I go back to my checklist now, I can just drag this over to white-breasted nuthatch. Oops. This is enough. Move the touchpad. Drag both of these there and see if this actually works. I think it will. So then once they're uploaded, you can click on it and and rate it. And so one is barely recognizable, like there might not even be a bird in the picture. Two is really blurry, but you can kind of tell what it is. Three is an average, shot. Four is, I'd probably give this a 4. It's pretty close up and it's pretty sharp. 5 is exceptional. And this is a female. It's kind of dull black, so you can put that in. It's probably an adult, but let's call it an adult female. And then if there's other species in the photo, you get a chance to do those. And then when we hit done, and do it again, and then the pictures are in the checklist. Now, I did this with 2 of them, and they both came out large. But one of the cautionary tales here is that if you, a lot of times I look, as a reviewer, I look at checklists, and they have photos, but they're really small. They're just like a little postage stamp, and I think it's because what people have done is they've dragged a thumbnail into the checklist. So, for example, if I'm in my photo catalog here, and I'm not on the main things, and I just drag straight from there into this checklist rather than putting it out on my desktop first. Let's see if this does this. Just hit done. You probably won't do it, but yeah. So see how much smaller that is than the other photos, and so that's something to be aware of if you're putting photographs in checklists, is to make sure you're doing it with a full-size copy of the photo rather than a thumbnail. That's about what I wanted to show you. I mean, I'm happy to sort of do any what ifs or play around if anybody wants to try anything, or if there's anything that I was kind of unclear on. I'm more than happy to answer more questions or to show more ways to do things. So, any what ifs or anything else that people would want to have a look at?
We talked about bird packs. We just set up the bird pack.
Yeah, so they have got, usually they'll prompt you, if you go to a new place, they'll prompt you that you don't have a bird pack for that area. Otherwise, it might just give you like all the birds in the birds, and just gives you 2 data points for it. So I've never intentionally just gone to download a pack. I've almost always just been prompted to do it. Except for I'm going to Costa Rica, so I've done that. I have gone to get a Costa Rica pack. So I can yeah, so that then it can take your location and knows which suite of birds to use.
Do you want to just do recent snowy owl sightings on? I mean, I think that'd be something that people would do. Like if you just came to the Flathead and you're like, oh, I want to see snowy owls. Has anybody seen any in the Flathead in the last month or so?
Okay. So you go explore.
Make sure you're talking to Mike.
Go explore. So yeah, looking for recent snowy owl records, we go to explore, and I went to the species map. And so you type in the species name. And it's working with all the birds of the world, so you can have to type in a lot of. I don't think if you put maybe if you put the location over here in first, it filters it in the positive. So if we do current year, there's not going to be that many, but let's see. I have to put this down a second. Yeah, so here locally, so far, the only record that's been put in is out in West Valley by Corey. That was during the count. But if you zoom out, There's a few others in, oops, ooh. Let's go further and further out. Kazakhstan. I ran into someone from Kazakhstan in town today. So this shows you where they are, in North America. So far, this one we've got this delay here. Sorry, this is a little, it has a seizure. So you should say show points sooner. Zoom in.
There's that one down in California.
Yeah, there's that LA bird. A lot of people have gone to see that one. And then again, you can click on their checklist and they've got, there it is, shot through a grapefruit tree or orange tree.
That's perfect framing.
What a shot.
That's not farmland.
It is on a rooftop, though.
Yeah.
It is on a rooftop. Seems like they like those rooftops. So yeah, this one's up by Fort Peck somewhere.
The first snowy was in Alabama.
Wow.
On a roof.
And they had one in Hawaii a couple of years ago, of all places. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to explore those kinds of questions. Where are people seeing what? I use it, I bird daily or pretty much daily and enter checklists most days. So I use it a lot for my own record keeping. Like I said, one of the things that I've been doing is this county listing, which is really kind of a fun way of exploring new places in Montana. That's one I get a kick out of doing that. And yeah, having alerts, it's just nice to know when somebody's finding something odd. You get sort of instantaneous record of that, or at least daily. I just had a couple of last points for those that are going to use it or are using it, and I just want to go back to my.
Well, you're doing a bit off topic, but how reliable is Merlin for identifying birds, especially if it's the only identifier for the bird?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was wondering if someone would ask that. So I don't use Merlin, but I probably should since I can't hear all the high-pitched birds anymore. So Merlin has voice recognition. It's not actually voice recognition, it's sonogram matching is what it does. So it records and then it creates a sonogram and then it matches the sonogram to the shape of the notes of known birds. It's getting better all the time, but it still makes really bad errors. It'll call your dog a great owl or a creaking gate, a blue jay, or whatever it is. But it is getting better. And they ask eBirders who are using Merlin to make sure to verify the bird, or to say if they weren't able to verify that it was only identified by Merlin, so that reviewers can make a decision. It is interesting as a reviewer. I had someone in Missoula that reported some Altamira orioles and anyway, two like Mexican species on a checklist here in Montana, and I contacted him and he kind of took umbrage with me questioning him because he said, well, that's what Merlin says they were and that's what Cornell says we should use. It's like, well, yeah, but that's why we have folks that know the area and we talked it out and he understood, but it can create some issues. But Merlin's a great tool, a powerful tool, and I think even really skilled birders that have all their facilities that can hear everything still will overlook certain birds. They just, especially common things, it often happens. When I was doing breeding bird survey routes, I would have Susanna along with me and I would say I had this, that, and the other thing. And she goes, you didn't have a robin? It's like, oh, yeah, no, there's a robin. So yeah, I mean that's a good tool. If people, it's tied in with eBird. It's drawing from the same sets of data, basically. So that's people putting in photos, and there was a lot of machine learning with Merlin with photos, and the same thing is happening with audio. So they still want people to submit audio so that they can continue to train the machines to recognize. But yeah, it's another good tool. But if you use Merlin and it says that something is there that you didn't see, you should really try to verify it.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, I heard a lot of birds that Merlin just didn't pick up.
Hmm.
when I was out on the CDC and a field trip.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, ravens right next to you, things like that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I haven't messed with it. It needs improvement, but it's like eBird. It's an incredible tool. I mean, it's drawing on so many data. So just a few final things. If you're new to eBird, don't be intimidated by it. Just start slowly. You can do as little or as much as you want. Starting with yard lists is good. You know the birds in your yard, and just do that regularly, and then it'll be interesting when something new shows up. If you're a frequent user of eBird, they do want you to do complete lists whenever possible. Those can be short. They can just be 5 minutes. But a complete list from a small area is important for building all those models. If you travel 50 miles and do one checklist, that's not very meaningful. You've passed through a whole bunch of habitats. And so that doesn't really help build the science part of eBird. So they recommend traveling lists of less than 5 miles. I mentioned earlier the use of hotspots, just making sure that when you put a checklist in, you're comfortable with where you put it geographically, that it matches where you were. It's really easy to pick hotspots just because they're nearby. And I see that frequently. And there's part of a problem is when you have a bunch of hotspots near each other. We have that on the north shore of the lake. There's 4 or 5 WMA, WPA. People don't really know the difference between the two, and that happens. And then the details thing, as a reviewer, when it asks for details, don't take offense with that. Just put in a few notes as to why you identified it as what it was. And, make that something other than, I'm sure that's what it was. And to use it as a learning tool, as I showed you, there's all kinds of ways that you can learn from this. Just looking at distribution lists, what's there this time of year. God, I was sure I saw such and such, but when I look at the eBird, that's not supposed to be here at all. Especially when you're traveling somewhere else, it's a really good tool because, if you bird a lot locally, you know what to expect when, for the most part, and in what habitats. But, the first time I went to Sonoma, California, I heard a pileated woodpecker, which is as distinctive as could be, and I thought to myself, do they have pileated woodpeckers here? It's like I needed to kind of verify. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's what that was. So anyway, I really highly recommend it. I'm happy to always help. Like I say, I'm a reviewer. I can certainly help ask questions. And when I lead field trips, I'll do some eBirding on the field trip. And so that's the other thing, you can share checklists. So. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a few things. Thanks.